Welcome back to the Changemaker podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. Today, I have two guests who are very dear friends of mine. I was trying to think of it, guys, but I think we've probably known each other for over a decade now. And that would be Jorge and Christie Diez. So George just put the next mayor of Augusta in office. As lead campaign strategist, Diez took an under-the-radar local businessman from a field of 9 candidates to mayor-elect of Georgia's second largest city. A statistical tie with one other person forced to run off. Through Diez's strategy, the candidate led all South, West, and downtown precincts with Latino, white, and black voters. He is the head of the Georgia Strategy Group. He's a former reporter. His lovely wife is Christie Diez is the weekend anchor and multi-skilled journalist for 11 Live in Atlanta. I love that. But you guys both have great stories to tell. So welcome, Jorge. Welcome, Christie.
Welcome to the Changemaker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Hey, thanks for having us, Deke.
We're very happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm very glad to see you on this lovely Monday morning. So before we get started, you guys are having your first child, which I think is so wonderful. And so when is baby due?
In about 2 weeks. So it could be any day now. She's due on September 5th.
Wow. Well, going back to, so we met when both of you were with the CBS affiliate here in Augusta, Georgia, Channel 12. But it has been a wonderful thing for me personally to watch how much you guys have grown as individuals and as a couple in those years. So, Christie, I want to start off with you. So obviously, you're a weekend anchor, but you've got something else. You were named a couple of years ago a Rosalind Carter Mental Health Journalism Fellow. So you've got a project that you've completed that I want you to tell our listeners about and our viewers. But it is so interesting to me how you invested yourself into that project personally.
Oh gosh, I can't wait to tell you about this because this was such a heart project for me. It was an honor to be chosen for this fellowship for mental health reporting and mental health journalism. And I was one of 8 U.S. journalists selected for a global fellowship with the Carter Center, specifically the Rosalind Carter Mental Health Journalism Fellowship. And my project was inspired by my own experience and my own journey helping my dad live with dementia. And as a daughter in her 20s, kind of living her years out of order, helping him navigate that diagnosis and that journey, I got a front row seat to all of the gaps in care, the negligence in care, the difficulties that arise for families who are otherwise really struggling to find the resources and the support they need, mostly because it doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
So I set out for about 2 years through this fellowship to put together a docuseries talking about the gaps in care and how to close that gap, kind of where mental health and dementia care collide and why people get left behind or fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And the first part, ultimately, Deke, this will be a 3-part docuseries. The first part has just aired. It debuted this summer. And it was focused on people that I had been having conversations with over the last 18 months regularly who are living with some form of dementia. Everything from young onset Alzheimer's to Lewy body to frontotemporal, all different kinds of dementia. And they use their own voices because at this point they are still living independently and have a support system around them that allows them to do that. And so we got to hear about their experiences and what it's like to live with that diagnosis, from their own voices and their own experience. And they did such a good job being honest and raw, experiencing it. Of course, it was very personal to me, a difficult project to do, because I started it in September of 2020 and my dad died 3 months later.
I remember.
And so this was a journey through grief and healing and love, and something that was so important that I had to keep going. And I think these people did better than I could have ever asked for, in explaining what it's really like and putting their heart out on the line.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if you guys knew, but my father struggled before his passing with Parkinson's for 8 years. And so I'm used to, I mean, I know what it's like to have a loved one going through a similar type circumstance, and it's never easy. But George, I want to get to you on this too, because you were able to put together a campaign. How many campaigns have you run now? So you started off as a reporter at Augusta. You started Georgia Strategies Group. I am so proud of you. And I don't think you've run a campaign that you've lost, correct?
Well, yeah, that's true. And before I get to that, I'll just have to say, I mean, I was just so impressed hearing Christy telling us about her commitment to
Yeah.
Alzheimer's and caregivers, and I'm just so proud, not only for her to be my wife, but for us to be bringing a child. So it was just so inspiring to hear her say that. And going back to your question, it's been fun. I mean, it's been fun being undefeated. We have not lost a race that we've been a part of. In general, personally, I've had 8 races that I've been involved of, 8-0, and 3 that I have led 100% on my own under Georgia Strategy Group. So we've been very successful and very excited, not only for the future of our company, but more importantly, also for the future of our communities in places like Augusta. So I think you guys have a lot to look forward in your next mayor, in Garnett Johnson, and in the First Lady, Tony Seals Johnson.
They are both wonderful people. But George, you and I've come from a background in politics, and we talk politics a whole lot. But listening to Christy, one of the things, I've got a executive coaching client, Deke in Atlanta, he's CEO of AG Roads, who have 3 nursing homes. And so he shared with me just what it's like dealing with that, in the midst of COVID. But one of the things I've come to think about is that, so I always focus on finding the common ground. And I think you do too. When you look at, the results of the election here in Augusta, you pulled from, it wasn't just, and historically in Augusta, politics has had the reputation of just being black and white. So I'm glad that your campaign went after a truly diverse group of voters. You didn't just focus on that black and white. But one of the things I've realized, and Christy, you can speak to this as well, but George, I want to talk about the common ground aspect, that so many people I know, you went through it a little younger, Christy. I did as well. I lost my mom when I was 29 or 25. But aging parents are something that pretty much everybody I know is dealing with now. And it's, do we put them in a home? What do we do? So it's just, but George, speak to that. That seems like to me, even politically, that's a common ground issue that you would think that both parties could come around.
Well, I'll tell you, it's one of the things that surprises me to see that there hasn't been a common ground found on what I believe and what data shows to be one of the most deadliest diseases and illnesses that we're dealing with in America. And I would hope that with what Christy is doing and with what I am doing, we can find a way to kind of meld those things together to bring awareness and to also bring effective change. Because you're right, the same way that politics doesn't care if you're black, white, Hispanic, Catholic, or Baptist, same thing with Alzheimer's. And seeing Christy going through this journey, I was able to have not a front row seat like her, but I was able to ride in the back sometimes and see how this not only affected her dad, and at his age, because he was a young guy, vibrant guy, successful guy, had a whole life ahead of him. But also seeing how this not only affected him and when it comes to age, but how it affects different people in different ways. But at the same time, there's this common ground where there is a big need for help.
Yeah, there really is. Go ahead, Chrissy.
I would agree with that completely. I mean, this disease does not see color.
Yeah.
It affects everybody, and that's why it's so relatable and why it is necessary, to do both platforms, that we really have a voice to speak on. Journalism is one thing. I had the voice and the availability and the resources to speak on it, but you're going to need politicians and lawmakers to help
Yeah.
change the rules to age effectively, to age independently and with dignity, to set up some laws in place. Those are things that families are still fighting for right now. And there are obvious disparities in, different races, and whether communities and families of color get the support that they need. And that exists. That is another gap in care. But there are also some very common threads that families face that you can relate to each other as human on.
Yeah.
And that's where you come together and you say, okay, this is affecting everybody. And we have to do something about it. So it's important to bridge those gaps, not just in the gaps in care, but even in our own industries.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, let me ask you this, because you guys are, Christie, you're still a journalist, and George, you come from a background in journalism. I believe you both majored in journalism at the University of Georgia. So
Good
go
luck.
Dogs, by the way. But it seems to me that nowadays can be a very adversarial relationship between politicians and the media. And I always viewed it, and you guys can speak to this, but I always had an open door policy, and I knew, I wanted to help you guys do your job better and to keep you well informed. And so I never saw the media as an adversary. I saw them as an ally. So can you speak to that? Because it does seem like, though, you get a lot of fake news. You get a lot of people just demonizing just journalists as a whole.
I'm going to let Christie start off with that.
Okay. Well, I will tell you, and this is not just my perspective, speaking to colleagues that have been in the media sector, in the journalism sector over the last couple of years, it's gotten rough. It is tough because the environment and the vibe has changed, and the relationships have changed, and the opinions and perspective on what journalism is has changed, and fighting the misinformation battle has become so crucial and daily and 24/7. And Deke, I'll tell you, you were unique. You were unique in that you had that open door policy. You welcomed us in and created a relationship that really took us through your entire time in mayor. And it didn't mean we didn't ask you hard questions. It just meant that you were willing to answer them because you had nothing to hide. And that made you really unique. And I wish there were more relationships like that right now. I think the misinformation battle has made it harder to talk to people on an honest human level, because you are just constantly battling just a fire hose of bad information and false information. And so I will tell you, it's been tough, but it is possible to get back to. And there are some people that I still talk to, contacts that I have here in Atlanta that I still have, for example, you out in Augusta, that I have great relationships with. So it is possible. It's just a little harder these days.
It is, but I want to get your take on that too, George, because so I was speaking to a Master's of Public Administration class at Augusta University recently. And so your former cameraman, Andrew, was one of the students. And he said, during your time in office, you had an open door policy, and unless you were in a meeting, we could just pretty much walk right in. He said, but the current administration, I never got beyond the lobby. So he asked me, why was transparency important to you? But I think it's important on both sides. To prevent the misinformation getting out there, just provide reporters with good information. But I told Andrew, I said, look, he said, so why was transparency so important to you? I said, if you start cutting off access to the public and the media, and you're an elected official, it doesn't matter if you've got nothing to hide. It gives the appearance of that. So transparency really builds trust. And I mean, I trusted you guys to do your job, and I mean, if I ever did anything wrong, I would have expected you to go after me. But speak to that a little bit, that transparency issue, George.
Well, a couple of things that I'll say. You know, it is a very complex issue because journalism has changed in a way that I have not seen other industries change. And even in my short time of being a journalist, there was drastic changes. And talking to my professors when I was in college at UGA and what journalism was as a career for them and what I was facing as I was going into was two very different things. So I think that might have contributed to some of the layers of issues that maybe we're seeing brewing up now. In the sense that number one, I think that I have a lot of respect for reporters because I was one. In some ways, I maybe still consider myself one because I love to talk to people and interview them, and my wife is one. But in a way, I also see some of the darker sides of journalism in the sense of how overworked these reporters are, and I think that may lead to maybe some of the issues of maybe feeling that there's fake news. I think sometimes you're on a tight deadline and you're having to squeeze a lot of information in a short amount of time. And what some folks don't realize is that that person that is in the studio fronting that story probably just ran from their computer, from editing that, from them filming their own video, logging their own interview, and putting it all together to make it by 5 p.m. So I think this culture of being first and on demand that we've seen not only in journalism, but across our culture has played an effect on what we're seeing of this distrust in news. But on the other hand, I also see it being as some of the issues that we're seeing in politics floating their way into journalism or media and news. So there's a lot of layers to this. It's a complex issue. And the biggest thing that I say is, I respect those that I believe are presenting the truth. And aside from that, I think the people that present the truth also are some of the ones that usually know how to cultivate relationships. Because relationships are a big deal in this also. Because you are right. You could be doing nothing wrong, but just the appearance of impropriety can be a story. So when you have that relationship, that one-on-one, and you build that rapport, it's a little different because now you get to separate that persona from that individual. And you're like, you know what? I know Deke, or I know George, or I know this person. Let me see if there's something more to this.
It's interesting that you say that. That's one of the things that I did when I was in office was I spent time throughout the community on a regular basis. And I didn't have cameras following me because I think sometimes, that might be an issue with the public. If you've always got cameras following you, they can sense, this is a photo op. But it was for exactly that reason because I'm like, okay, now if somebody tries to paint me, because I think sometimes basically elected officials can become caricatures of themselves. But I always thought, now, if people know me at the grassroots level, then if anybody tries to make me a caricature, it's not going to be effective. But that transparency and those connections, they do take work. But I want to speak to you about this too, but I always had respect for you guys as young reporters and had a great relationship with many young reporters. And part of that was due to the fact that Lindsay Garner, who used to always also be at Channel 12, opened up to me one time. I'm not sure if Lindsay's still in the media. It seems like there's been a big turnover, but she said, I was fresh out of college. They're not paying me anything, and they're sending me to cover local government, and I don't understand what a millage rate is or anything, but that's why I think it's incumbent upon elected officials to help educate those young reporters because you can't, most citizens don't even understand the millage rate completely.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And as you mentioned, Lindsay Garner, if I'm not mistaken, I think she may be back with News 12. I think she's an investigative producer behind the scenes for them. So I think she is still in journalism and still producing content for viewers in Augusta. But no, I think you're right. I think there is a level of also education because here's the thing: when you're in J school and journalism school, they give you an idea of, there's beats you're going to cover and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's just journalism. I mean, the same way you cover a football game, you cover a city council meeting to a certain degree. The details are different, but the formula, there's a formula to it. So I think it takes a two-way road. And here's the other thing also, being able to do one thing that I think you did very well is you can't fake sincerity. Yeah. When you're sincere, you're sincere. I mean, you just can't fake sincerity. And I think that comes across not only when you're with the public, but also when you're with reporters. And I think that plays, and also I think that plays also from the reporter to the elected official or the subject.
Absolutely. I mean, human is human. You can kind of read somebody. And everybody you're dealing with in this situation, the reporter, the elected official, everybody's human. So it's back to that relationship, and that it makes a difference. And then how the story is presented, and how those sound bites come out. But I also love that Lindsay had the vulnerability to just be honest enough. It's one of the only industries where you have to become an expert in something in like 4 hours and then play it down.
Well, I will tell you a good story about Lindsay too, though. So somehow Channel 12 on the morning of James Brown's death, Christmas 2006, my wife and I used to spend the night with her father. Somehow News 12 tracked me down at my father-in-law's house, and that's how I found out that James Brown had passed. But so we had a policy that, we had a great relationship with the media, but that we wouldn't do interviews inside our house. But for Lindsay, on the event of Mr. Brown's death, I violated that policy, and Melissa cleared that, but so she interviewed me from my house on Christmas morning.
Wow. Extenuating circumstances.
Under extenuating circumstances, but what a great young lady. Well, George, I want to get to what you're doing now, though. So you went from, being in the media to really being an entrepreneur in the private sector. What led you to make that transition?
Wow. The reason why I say wow is because I wish I had a clear-cut answer. I wish I could tell you that the sky broke open one day and I heard this voice and it gave me a perfect path, and that's really not what happened. I mean, it just kind of fell together in the sense that it was, I guess, just God's plan. I never envisioned myself to be owning a public relations firm and working with folks that not only I admired, but that I know that folks that can really affect and bring change. So one of the biggest things for me is that, as I was a reporter, I had this desire, and the biggest desire was to help people. And I think that that's one of the main reasons why I became a reporter. But at the same time, I also said, hey, I want to help myself. I want to provide for myself. I want to provide for my family. And I was having this issue where, is it mutually exclusive? Can you only just help people and not provide for yourselves? How do you find that medium? And because of the ethics and because of the principles of journalism, sometimes that can be tricky. Sometimes that really can be tricky. And then that's when I said, you know what, I really enjoy this, but I think I want to go out there. And my first thing is I want to go out there and I want to make some money. I want to make some money. I mean, I'm not even going to lie, because I had student loans. I really enjoyed my job at News 12. But at that point, I was thinking, hey, there were some people in different industries that didn't even have college degrees that were making more money than me. And my first motivator was, I have to pay these bills. I have to start growing some wealth. And that led me to go work with the largest energy infrastructure company in North America, Kinder Morgan. And a lot of that is thanks to some great mentorships and that I had. And that really kind of snowballed into it, because when I went to Kinder Morgan, they were great folks to work with. And here's basically what they told me. We want you to wear the shirt. We want you to give out the business card. You're going to be at our office. As far as everybody knows on the outside world, you're Kinder Morgan. In the inside world, you're a contractor with Kinder Morgan. And to do that, you got to start a company so we can pay you. So I said, okay, cool. And I just did that. And it just, one thing led to another. Once that project fell out, I was kind of nervous. I didn't know what I was going to do. I started working with a delinquent tax company that was collecting property taxes on behalf of counties. And then that led to working with a nonprofit entity. And it kind of snowballed. And I said, okay, maybe I've got some momentum here. Maybe I can do something. And then that's when I had one of my first opportunities really to step out on my own and run Oz Nesbitt's campaign, who was running for chairman in Metro Atlanta County, about 20 miles, 30 miles east of Atlanta. And really at that point, I was really doing well, and I thought, okay, I think I'm going to stick to this. And Oz and I had some good conversations, and he said, hey, come on over to my administration. I want you to be part of my leadership team. I want you to help give us some counsel and guidance when it comes to public relations and media and revamp this whole department. And it was an opportunity that quite was hard for me to give up. And I stopped everything, and I dedicated about 4.5 years to the public sector. And then after about 4.5 years, I remember one day coming home, and I just told Chrissy, I said, you know what, I think this may be it for me. I think God may have something else. I don't know what it is. I really don't know what it is. And we were both very nervous. And I remember crying a little bit because I was like, what do I do next? And I just started praying, and I just felt confident. And then I went and I said, you know what? I've resigned, and I dedicated myself fully to our company. And thank God ever since then, we've been able to continue to provide, help a lot of people, help ourselves at the same time, and continuing to do the most important thing to me, which is helping others, and at the same time also helping my family grow. And I don't think those things are mutually exclusive.
No, they're not. And I've got a gentleman that's serving as my spiritual advisor now. So we're really focused on getting the podcast to where it's profitable. And so with very little, marketing, we're up to 4,000 listens on average per episode. But now I'm a capitalist as well. I want to make money off of it. And he said, there's nothing wrong with making a profit. And I think sometimes, doing what I do, I've given away so much advice for free, but at some point you got to make a living. But I want to touch on something that really just struck me, George. So I got to catch up with a friend of mine who's an entertainment lawyer who I met a couple of years ago in New York City. So when the pandemic hit, he started calling me, and we would have regular discussions. So he's living in a southern city now. He's not in, a southern major city, but I don't want to give away who he potentially is. But he was having panic attacks because his politics are conservative. And he was like, in the entertainment industry, if I express my political views, I'm worried that I could ruin my entire career. And you talking about, you want to take care of your family. One of the things that was causing him panic attacks was the fact that he had just gotten engaged. He's now married. And it's like, he's like, it's not just me. If my career goes down the tubes, I've got 2 mouths to feed now. But I'd love to get your input on that. But it kind of goes back to what we said about, the people hate on the media and just make it miserable for reporters. And they're just, that cancel culture is real across all sectors.
Wow, so many things to that, because I think about, as you say, the cancel culture and really how that affects a lot of people. And in regards to that, one of the things that I've really been trying to continue to grow in my faith is remembering one thing, is that God has extended a lot of grace upon me, grace upon me and my family. And my number one job is to try to extend that same grace back. Yep. And so when it comes to that cancel culture, that's kind of my belief, we've, it's a tough thing because, we all have to be responsible for what we do or say. But at the same point, I also believe people have the right to change and grow and evolve.
Exactly.
So, on that front, I can definitely understand where that gentleman's coming from. But on the other front, I'll tell you what, I'm facing it right now. You talk about the anxiety or the panic in regards to growing a family. It's definitely something that hits me on a lot of different levels. at different times and in different ways. But one of the things that I will share, and one of the things that I am most grateful to after my faith in God, is really just how strong my wife is. My wife is tough. She is a strong, strong lady, very smart woman, and she has really helped me during these times when I get overwhelmed, because it's real. I didn't think it was real. I didn't think it was real, but it gets overwhelming for men. And not to say it doesn't get overwhelming for women. I'm sure it gets way much overwhelming for them. So I'm not trying to water that down at all. But I think it is important for us as men to remember that, we have anxieties too, and we have concerns too. And one of the things that I do think is important is being part of that mental health and working that out like you work out anything else, like you work out any other muscle.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I've shared with my spiritual counselor, you and I have a lot of talk about our faith, and it helps to have people that are sort of like-minded that you can talk to. And you'll find this interesting. I just had a minister that's a good friend of mine on the show, but it goes back to the political thing. He said, I tell my congregation, Jesus is not a Democrat or a Republican. He's God. Okay. So let's just get that right. But as I say, it has just been, for me to help mentor you and to have known you guys all these years and to see the couple that you've grown into, the man and the woman, and I can't wait to see the parents that you grow into. That's my favorite thing in the world, is just to see people that, I had some small part in their lives that I'm friends with or whatever that just blossom, and you guys have absolutely blossomed.
Oh no! Thank you so much, and I think I can say this for the both of us. Just thank you for the pleasure of knowing you and Melissa and your family through these years. We've really have appreciated the support, the guidance, and the counsel, and more importantly, just the friendship. You guys are always pulling for us, and it's hard to find folks that sincerely pull for you sometimes, and we really appreciate that.
Well, we're all in it together. And I tell people I'm just an old hippie at heart, and sort of everything I do is just trying to unite the tribes. And I'm not an extremist. I like to hang around cool, productive people who are making a positive impact on this world. And you guys fit the bill. And I bet that little girl will fit the bill one day as well, with having you guys as parents.
God willing.
we really hope so.
Before I ask you our closeout question, Christie, where can people find your documentary?
It is on the website at 11alive.com. It is called Desperately Waiting. So sometimes the easiest thing to do is to Google it, Desperately Waiting 11 Alive, and it should come up right there for you. It's broken into segments that basically, if it aired on TV, there would be commercial breaks in between them. So all of those together make part one. Also, if you have a Roku or a Fire TV, you can watch it on that platform as well. Again, just search for Desperately Waiting.
Good deal. Well, as we get towards the end, I will ask you guys my standard question. You first, Christie, because I'm hopefully a gentleman and ladies first. But what on any given day puts a smile on your face and brings joy to your heart?
Oh gosh, well right now it's feeling this baby move and a lot. So she's doing gymnastics and it's a reminder to be present and to stay trusting and to continue to take those leaps of faith that we have so far that have led us here and that are about to lead us on the next great big journey together.
Wow, that is a deep question. To me, honestly, it's two things. I really love seeing Christie succeed. I love seeing Christie recognized and rewarded, and just making a difference for her work. That really inspires me. It always brings a big smile to my face. And quite honestly, I wouldn't be honest if I didn't tell you this. When I pay my bills, man, that puts a smile on my face. I love when I'm like, all right, this is paid, this is paid, this is paid, and this is paid. Thank you, God.
Well, you can only imagine the width and breadth of answers I've gotten to that question. but one young lady just said, coffee. I'm like, okay. And then after we wrapped, she's like, I can't believe you put me on the spot and I didn't know what to say, so I just said coffee. I'm like, no, coffee brings a smile to my face and puts joy in my heart every morning.
I'll cheers to that as well. Yeah.
Well, guys,
I have a
go
question
ahead.
for you, Deke.
Yeah.
All right, here's a $1 million question that I know you hear all the time. When are you running again?
Yeah, I get that one every so often. I think I've gotten that on the show a number of times. I will tell you, in answer to your question, it's not out of the question. I am trying, I don't know if I told you this, but I'm trying to get Andrew Yang on the show to talk about the Forward Party, which very much interests me, and that, it's comprised of Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And it's interesting, though, when they made the announcement that it had come out, Christine Todd Whitman, the former Republican mayor of New Jersey and governor of New Jersey, is part of it as well. Man, the far left and the far right just freaking slammed it. Third party's never going to work. I'm like, I think that's because they perceive it as a threat.
Oh, yeah.
I honestly do. So long answer, stay tuned. Well, guys, thank y'all for being great friends, wonderful guests, and I can't wait to hear about. Do you have a name for the baby, or can you tell me?
We really don't yet.
We don't.
I think we're gonna have to see her.
Well, I can't wait for baby girl to get here. But thank y'all so much for being my guests.
All right, thanks for having us, Deke.
Thank you, Deke.
Y'all have a great day.
You too.
That's all the time we got. Dropping the mic, and we are out.